Can I help you, old man? This is a restricted motor pool, not a nursing home field trip. You're a little far from the front gate. The voice, sharp and dripping with condescension, cut through the humid Texas air. Sergeant Dale Miller, all of 26 years old and puffed up with the authority of his 3 stripes, stood with his arms crossed, a greasy rag dangling from his back pocket. His gaze was fixed on the elderly man standing near the bay door, a silhouette against the blinding afternoon sun. The man was frail, with a stoop in his shoulders and skin like wrinkled parchment. He wore simple khaki pants and a faded blue polo shirt, his white hair a stark contrast to the olive drab and grease-stained concrete of the Fort Hood motor pool. He simply stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes on the source of Miller's frustration, the hulking, silent beast that was Bradley Fighting Vehicle 734. For 3 days, it had been their albatross. The diagnostics showed nothing. The engine would turn, cough black smoke, and die. They had replaced the fuel injectors, checked the turbo, and run every computer test in the manual twice. It was dead, and Miller's platoon was slated for gunnery qualifications in less than a week. His captain was breathing down his neck, and his own pride was taking a beating. The appearance of this civilian, this relic, felt like a personal insult. The old man didn't seem intimidated. He took a slow step forward, his eyes, surprisingly clear and sharp, scanning the Bradley's engine compartment. Having some trouble with the Cummins VT 903T, are we? He asked, his voice quiet but resonant, carrying a strange authority that didn't match his appearance. The casual use of the engine's official designation caught Miller off guard. Most civilians wouldn't know that. He scoffed, recovering his swagger. Yeah, we're having trouble, nothing a civilian would understand. This is complex military hardware, Grandpa, not your lawnmower. A few of the younger mechanics, a mix of privates and specialists sprawled out on creepers or leaning against tool chests, snickered. They were tired, frustrated, and Miller's arrogance was the only form of entertainment they had. One of them, a fresh-faced private named Evans, felt a knot of shame in his stomach but kept his head down, pretending to clean a wrench. He'd been raised to respect his elders, and this felt wrong, but Sergeant Miller was not a man you crossed. The old man ignored the jibe, his focus entirely on the vehicle. She's not getting enough air on ignition. The fuel mix is too rich. You can smell it. Smells like you're flooding her. Miller's face flushed a deep, angry red. He stepped forward, closing the distance until he was towering over the smaller man. Listen to me, Pop. I am the NCO in charge of this section. I have been trained by the United States Army to maintain these vehicles. I don't need some lost tourist wandering in off the street telling me how to do my job. Now, I'm going to ask you one last time, politely, to leave before I have the MPs escort you out. The old man finally turned his gaze from the engine to Sergeant Miller. There was no fear in his eyes, no anger. There was something else, something that looked disconcertingly like pity. Son, I've been working on engines like this since before your parents were born. That uniform you wear gives you authority, but it doesn't give you a monopoly on knowledge. Sometimes, the computer can't tell you what a little bit of experience can. This calm, reasoned response was like gasoline on a fire. Miller's professionalism evaporated, replaced by raw, youthful pride. He jabbed a greasy finger toward the base gate. Experience? What experience? Fixing tractors on a farm? Changing the oil in your Buick? You have no idea what you're looking at. This is a multi-million-dollar piece of war-fighting equipment. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. You see these hands? He held up his own, stained with grease and dotted with small cuts. These are the hands of a United States Army mechanic. Now look at yours. The old man's hands were wrinkled and spotted with age, but they were clean. Deceptively so. You're done here. Get out. To punctuate his command, Miller snatched the clean red rag from the old man's hand, which he hadn't even noticed him pick up from a nearby bench, and threw it onto the oily floor. Don't touch my equipment. The air in the bay grew thick and silent. Even the other mechanics stopped their half-hearted work. Miller had crossed a line from arrogance to outright humiliation. Private Evans looked up, his mouth slightly agape, waiting for the old man to yell, to crumble, to do anything. But he did nothing. He simply looked down at the rag on the floor, then back up at Miller, his expression unreadable. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the quiet hum of an electric golf cart, the kind senior officers used to get around the sprawling base, became audible. It grew louder, and then a black command vehicle, a modified Polaris, swung into the wide opening of the motor pool bay. It stopped abruptly. At the wheel was the base commander himself, Colonel Thompson, a full-bird colonel. In the passenger seat sat a command sergeant major whose chest was so laden with ribbons it looked like a military rainbow. Miller's eyes went wide. He snapped to the most rigid position of attention he could manage, his mind racing. What was the post commander doing in his motor pool? Had someone reported him? Was it about the dead Bradley? Sergeant, the colonel's voice boomed, echoing off the concrete walls. It was not a friendly greeting. At ease, he commanded, though the tone implied the opposite. Colonel Thompson got out of the cart, his movements crisp and deliberate. He was a tall man in his late 40s, with a face that seemed permanently carved into a look of serious intent. He completely ignored Sergeant Miller, his eyes scanning the bay until they landed on the old man. And then, the entire universe of the motor pool tilted on its axis. Colonel Thompson strode directly past the ramrod-straight sergeant, walked up to the old man, and snapped a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. "Mr. Galloway," the colonel said, his voice now filled with a deep, unwavering respect that bordered on reverence. "I am so sorry. My driver got turned around. I hope we haven't kept you waiting long." The old man, Mr. Galloway, simply smiled faintly and returned a slow, casual nod. "It's no trouble, Colonel. I was just admiring this beautiful piece of machinery. Your young sergeant here was just explaining some things to me." The emphasis on explaining was subtle, but it landed on Sergeant Miller like a physical blow. Miller's blood ran cold. He felt the eyes of his entire team on him. He could see the dawning horror and confusion on their faces. The colonel's gaze finally fell upon Miller, and the temperature in the bay dropped by 20 degrees. "Sergeant Miller," the colonel said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is Mr. Arthur Galloway. He is on this base as my personal guest for the dedication of the new Advanced Engineering Center tomorrow. A center, I might add, that is being named after him." Miller's jaw went slack. He felt dizzy. The command sergeant major stepped forward, his eyes boring into Miller. "Sergeant, let me spell this out for you, because you clearly have trouble recognizing greatness when it's standing 2 feet in front of your face. You are looking at Chief Warrant Officer 5 Arthur Galloway, retired. He served for 38 years. He started as a grease monkey in the Korean War, fixing Sherman tanks. In Vietnam, he was a crew chief on a Huey. On one particularly bad day, his helicopter was shot down miles behind enemy lines. He repaired the engine with nothing but a multi-tool and parts he salvaged from a destroyed Jeep, got the bird flying, and saved his entire crew, all while under enemy fire. For that action, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. A collective gasp went through the assembled mechanics. Private Evans felt like he was going to be sick. The Medal of Honor. It was a sacred thing, a name spoken in hushed tones. They had just witnessed a living legend be verbally abused and humiliated by their sergeant. The command sergeant major wasn't finished. He took another step, his voice rising with righteous indignation. After Vietnam, Mr. Galloway didn't just retire to a quiet life. He went to work for the Army's Engineering Corps as a civilian consultant. He was one of the lead designers on the AGT 1500 turbine engine that powers the M1 Abrams tank. And when they needed a reliable, powerful, and field-serviceable power pack for the new Bradley fighting vehicle program in the late 70s, he was the man who led the team that adapted and perfected the very Cummins engine you've been struggling with for the past 3 days. He pointed a thick finger at the silent Bradley. That engine is his baby. He knows every bolt, every wire, every gasket in that compartment by heart, because he helped put them there on the original blueprints. He has forgotten more about that engine than you will ever learn in your entire career. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant pop-pop-pop of a firing range. Sergeant Miller stood frozen, his face ashen. The world had been pulled out from under him. The arrogant, condescending authority he had wielded so proudly just moments before had curdled into a sickening, profound shame. He looked at Mr. Galloway, at the old man he had called Grandpa and Pop, and saw him for the first time. He saw the quiet strength, the deep well of knowledge behind those clear eyes. He saw a hero. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through his daze. "Sergeant Miller, you are relieved of your duties in this motor pool, effective immediately. Report to my office at 0600 tomorrow. We will have a long discussion about leadership, respect, and the history of the very army you claim to represent. Is that understood? Yes, Colonel, Miller whispered, his voice cracking. He didn't dare look at his men. He couldn't bear to see their contempt. The colonel then turned back to Mr. Galloway, his demeanor softening instantly. Sir, I am deeply embarrassed. This is not the standard of my command. Mr. Galloway raised a hand, a gesture of quiet dismissal. The boy is young, Colonel, full of pride. Sometimes pride needs to be humbled before it can become wisdom. It's a lesson every soldier learns one way or another. He then turned his attention back to the Bradley, all business. Now, about this engine. If someone could hand me a 13mm offset box end wrench and a clean rag, I believe I can have her running in about 5 minutes. Private Evans jolted into action, practically tripped over himself scrambling to the toolbox. He returned with the requested wrench and a fresh rag, holding them out to Mr. Galloway with trembling hands, as if offering a sacrament. Thank you, son, the old man said, giving Evans a warm, reassuring smile. He took the tools and, with a grace that defied his age, leaned into the engine compartment. The other mechanics, along with the colonel and the command sergeant major, gathered around, watching in complete, reverent silence. Mr. Galloway didn't use brute force. His movements were economical and precise. His wrinkled hands, which Miller had mocked, moved with an innate familiarity, like a concert pianist caressing his keys. He didn't consult a laptop or a manual. He simply reached deep into the engine's guts, his fingers feeling their way along fuel lines and wiring harnesses. Ah, there you are, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. His hand stopped near the base of the fuel pump, a spot so buried in other components that the younger mechanics had overlooked it entirely. It's the primary pressure return valve, he announced to the silent crowd. They redesigned the seal in the early 90s to a synthetic polymer. It's more durable, but if it sits for a while with even a little moisture in the fuel line, it can get sticky. The computer diagnostics would read the pressure as normal because the valve isn't broken. It's just not opening and closing with the precision it needs to. It's starving the engine of air on the turnover, with a few deft twists of the wrench, a tool he seemed to use more by feel than by sight. He loosened a fitting. He used the rag to wipe something unseen, then tightened it back up, torquing the bolt to a precise tension that he seemed to measure in his bones. The whole operation took less than 3 minutes. He pulled himself out of the engine bay and wiped his hands on the rag. He looked at the group of young mechanics. It's not always about what the computer tells you, he said gently. An engine has a rhythm, a heartbeat. You have to learn to listen to it, to feel it. He then nodded toward the driver's hatch. Someone want to turn the key? Private Evans, feeling a surge of courage, climbed into the driver's seat. He looked at Mr. Galloway, who gave him another encouraging nod. Evans took a deep breath, turned the key, and pressed the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, and then with a deafening, magnificent roar, the 600-horsepower diesel engine of Bradley 734 thundered to life. It didn't spew black smoke. It settled into a smooth, powerful, perfect idle. The sound of victory, of expertise, of legend, filled the motor pool. A spontaneous cheer went up from the other mechanics, a release of 3 days of pent-up frustration and a new wave of awe. They weren't just cheering for a running engine. They were cheering for the man who had resurrected it. Colonel Thompson was beaming, shaking his head in disbelief. Incredible, sir. Absolutely incredible. Mr. Galloway simply patted the Bradley's hull like an old friend. She's a good machine. Just needs a little understanding. He walked over to where Sergeant Miller was still standing, a statue of misery. He held out the greasy wrench. Miller took it, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He finally looked up, his eyes swimming with tears of shame. Sir? Mr. Galloway. I don't know what to say. I am so sorry. There is no excuse for my behavior. I was disrespectful, and I was wrong. I'm sorry. Mr. Galloway looked at the young NCO, his expression softening. He placed his clean, steady hand on Miller's shoulder. The weight of it felt immense, a physical transfer of grace and forgiveness. Son, he said, his voice low and kind. Pride is a heavy thing to carry. It makes you blind and deaf. Today, you learned to put it down. That's a more important lesson than anything you can learn from a technical manual. Don't forget it. With that, he turned and walked toward the colonel's cart. As he passed the other mechanics, they instinctively straightened up, some even saluting the man in the polo shirt. He was no longer just an old man. He was a monument. He had not only fixed an engine they couldn't, but he had also shown them what true strength and dignity looked like. It wasn't about yelling the loudest or having the most stripes on your sleeve. It was about quiet competence, profound humility, and a lifetime of service that needed no announcement. As the golf cart drove away, leaving the motor pool in a stunned and reflective silence, Sergeant Miller looked down at the wrench in his hand, then at the roaring, healthy engine of the Bradley. The grease on his hands suddenly felt different. It was no longer a badge of honor he wore with arrogance, but a reminder of a responsibility he had yet to fully understand. He knew his career had been irrevocably changed. The chewing out he would receive from the colonel would be harsh, and his punishment would be just. But as he stood there, humbled before his men, he realized the greatest punishment and the greatest gift had already been delivered by the quiet old man who knew the Bradley's heart better than anyone. He had been taught a lesson not about mechanics, but about manhood, a lesson that would echo longer and louder than any engine he would ever fix.